The Strange Things Iceberg, made by Reddit user I Am a Prion, is a random collection of strange, and at times very disturbing and unsettling, mysteries, theories, events, and phenomena. I don't even know how to summarise because each entry is so different, but this is honestly one of the most fascinating icebergs I've ever seen, so let's investigate. If you enjoy internet mysteries and generally disturbing content, feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications for more content like this. If you're interested in supporting the channel, you can become a Ko-fi member or a channel member to gain access to uncut videos and other perks, or you can leave me a tip by clicking the thanks under this video. Thanks to anyone who considers this. Some of the entries in this iceberg, particularly further down, centre around a variety of potentially disturbing topics, including death, murders, diseases, and conspiracy theories. Viewer discretion is advised. There were a few entries that I couldn't find explanations for online, so if you have any information on any I missed, feel free to let me know in the comments. I also added a few extra entries myself to the uncut version of this video, which you can watch by clicking the link in the description and becoming a Ko-fi member. The Chewbacca defense is a legal strategy used in court where a defense lawyer tries to confuse and distract the jury rather than disprove the case of the prosecutor. The term actually comes from an episode of South Park titled Chef Aid, in which Chef tries to claim that Alanis Morissette plagiarized his song, resulting in the record company suing him for harassment. In court, Johnny Cochran, the attorney for the record company, starts talking nonsense about the Star Wars character Chewbacca to confuse the jury, and it works, as Chef is found guilty and told to pay $2 million within 24 hours. In real life, Johnny Cochran was O.J. Simpson's attorney, and the trial in the episode is a parody of his closing arguments in the O.J. Simpson murder case, where he said, "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit," referring to O.J. trying on the gloves found at the murder scene and them seemingly not fitting. The Capitol Hill Mystery Soda Machine was a Coca-Cola branded vending machine in Seattle that had buttons labelled Mystery that would dispense unusual drink flavours. The machine had been there since at least the late 1990s, and at first had one mystery button, but eventually all 6 buttons were changed to Mystery. What's strange about this is that despite it attracting a decent amount of publicity, no one knows who owned or restocked it, and the city apparently had no permits for the machine on record. All this led people to wonder if it was haunted. On the 29th of June 2018, the machine suddenly disappeared, leaving only a note nearby that read, "Went for a walk." No one has seen it since, and its whereabouts and reasons for vanishing are unknown. Metro 2 is a secret deep underground metro system in Moscow, Russia, allegedly built while Joseph Stalin was in power so the Soviet leadership had communication and evacuation routes. It hasn't been officially acknowledged, and there isn't any solid proof, so its existence isn't 100% confirmed. However, there is a decent amount of evidence behind it, including information from various officials, such as Vladimir Shevchenko, former advisor of Putin and other former presidents, and Mikhail Poltaranin, a minister under Boris Yeltsin in the early 1990s, who said in 2008, quote, "This is an extensive network of tunnels and an emergency command center in case of war, where you can command the nuclear forces of the country. It can hide a lot of people. Its maintenance was necessary. I know that the Metro 2 has branches that go to the suburbs so that the command could move away from the epicenter of a nuclear attack." While the veins of most plants are mostly for the purpose of transporting water and nutrients, the vein structures in coriander leaves appear to have an unusual amount of interconnectivity and redundancy, with a balance between resilience and resource allocation, which is usually seen in systems that need a high level of defense against damage, allowing them to continue functioning even when part of the network is compromised. This sophisticated system suggests that coriander has evolved to survive in a range of conditions. This entry may also be referring to a theory that relates to the fact that some people like the taste of coriander while others say it tastes like soap. The theory suggests that if you like it, you have healthy genes that means you are at less of a risk of health conditions, but if you don't like it, you have genetic abnormalities that make you more prone to diseases. In 2005, the MMORPG video game World of Warcraft introduced the Corrupted Blood debuff, a virtual virus that would infect players when they were participating in a certain boss game at the end of a raid. It was only intended to transmit between characters in close proximity within this boss's game region, but a programming oversight led to it escalating in a pandemic throughout the whole fictional world. Thousands of players, particularly low-level players, died, and servers had to be quarantined and reset. According to people who played the game during this time, players would social distance to avoid becoming infected, with many leaving the cities and fleeing to the countryside, and there were even snake oil salesmen who claimed they had amulets that would protect against the virus. Reality Checkpoint is a lamppost in the middle of a 25-acre park in Cambridge, England, named Parker's Piece. The origin of the name isn't known for sure, but there are three main theories. The first being that it marks the boundary between the central university area, referred to as the reality bubble, and the real world of the people living beyond it. The lamppost is there as a warning to check your notions of reality before passing through to the other side. Another theory is that it was intended to be used as a landmark for people crossing the park at night because it's the only light for more than 100 meters. The final theory is that it's a reminder for drunk people to check that they can walk properly before going past the police station at the edge of the park. Igor and Grichka Bogdanov were twins who worked as TV presenters in France. Despite the pair's faces changing dramatically in the 1990s, with their cheekbones and lips becoming very large, they denied ever getting cosmetic surgery. No one believed them, and they're sometimes used as examples of what happens when plastic surgery goes too far. The twins were involved in a number of other controversies, notably what's known as the Bogdanov affair. Grichka received a PhD in maths in 1999, and Igor got a PhD in theoretical physics 3 years later, with both receiving the lowest passing grade. Between 2001 and 2002, they published 5 papers in peer-reviewed physics journals that resulted in the academic dispute over the legitimacy of their degrees, with many believing it was all a hoax. In response to criticism from physicists claiming that the papers were spoofs that consisted of physics jargon thrown together to form a meaningless combination of buzzwords, the twins released an email containing what appeared to be supportive statements from a professor named Laurent Friedel. However, he denied writing any of them. They continued to insist their work was valid, but various physicists dispute this, and in the years following the publications, only 2 other physicists cited their papers. Grichka died on the 28th of December 2021, and Igor died just 6 days later. They were 72 years old and died in hospital due to COVID after refusing vaccinations. River crab is a euphemism for internet censorship in China. It can be used as a verb, so instead of saying something has been censored, you can say it has been river crabbed. Another euphemism is harmonized, which was used after internet censorship, where even the word censorship was censored, following the Chinese Communist Party's announcement of their goal of creating a harmonious society. The Enneagram of Personality is a pseudo-scientific model consisting of 9 different personality types. Type 1 is the reformer and perfectionist, with an ego fixation on resentment. Type 2 is the helper and giver, with a fixation on flattery. Type 3 is the achiever and performer with a fixation on vanity. Type 4 is the individualist and romantic with a fixation on melancholy. Type 5 is the investigator and observer with a fixation on stinginess. Type 6 is the loyalist and loyal skeptic with a fixation on cowardice. Type 7 is the enthusiast and epicure with a fixation on planning. Type 8 is the challenger and protector with a fixation on vengeance. And Type 9 is the peacemaker and mediator with a fixation on indolence. This model is not widely accepted by professionals because of its subjectivity and inability to be tested scientifically. In September 2011, there was a post on the 4chan science board about the Haruhi problem, relating to the Japanese anime series The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya, which was broadcast as a non-linear narrative. The question was, if you were to watch the 14 episodes in the first season in every possible order, what would be the shortest string of episodes you would need to watch? One anon formulated a mathematical equation to answer the question and worked out that it would take about 4.3 million years to watch the series in every possible order. Cow tipping is likely an urban legend and is the activity of sneaking up on a cow and pushing it over for entertainment. According to the legend, cows can't get back up if they're tipped over, but this is not true. Although cows can sleep lightly while standing up, they usually lie down to sleep properly. Most cows weigh over 450 kilograms, so it'd be pretty hard, if not impossible, to push one over anyway. The belief that some animals can't get back up if pushed over and it may cause their death dates back to the Roman Empire and might have been partly due to the observation of rigor mortis in dead animals, where the limbs can stick out straight, possibly giving the impression they were tipped over. The Polar Bear Holding Facility, also known as the Polar Bear Jail, is an animal control facility set up in Manitoba, Canada in 1982, where dangerous polar bears are isolated until they can be relocated. It has 28 cells, and bears are tranquilized before being captured and taken to the jail, where they are held without food for between 2 to 30 days, sometimes longer if the bear is a repeat offender. The aim is to discourage them from approaching the town by creating a sense of danger by keeping them in captivity for an extended period of time. In July 1184, Henry VI, King of Germany, invited all of the nobles in the Holy Roman Empire to a meeting at the cathedral in Erfurt in an attempt to mediate the feud between Landgrave Louis III of Thuringia and Archbishop Conrad of Mainz. The weight of all these people on the wooden floor caused it to collapse, and most of them fell into the latrine cesspit below the ground floor. Around 60 people died, most of whom drowned in human excrement or suffocated due to the flames from the decomposing waste. The rest were crushed by falling debris. Mark V. Shaney was a Usenet user who often posted in the net.singles newsgroups in the 1980s. This wasn't an ordinary user though, as he didn't actually exist, in human form at least. He was a bot, and his postings were generated by Markov chain techniques, which is where his name came from. Although the posts were often rambling and some didn't make much sense, such as one of his most well-known lines, "I spent an interesting evening recently with a grain of salt," many readers were fooled into thinking they were written by a real person. In August 2016, two teenagers in Belgium hid inside wardrobes in IKEA to stay in the store after it closed, and this sparked a challenge known as the 24-hour fort challenge, where people would attempt to stay in a venue overnight without getting caught. In places such as supermarkets that were open 24 hours, the goal would be to stay there for as long as possible without getting caught. The candy desk is a tradition of the US Senate, which was started by California Senator George Murphy when he decided to keep a drawer of candy in his desk for himself and his colleagues, even though eating was prohibited on this floor. When he left the Senate after 6 years, the tradition was continued by the following senators and is still ongoing to this day. The Dave rule, also known as the Dave to female ratio, is an inside joke in Silicon Valley startup culture that's a reference to the gender gap. It states that if a team has as many women as it does people named Dave, then it has an acceptable gender balance. Fed speak refers to the vague and ambiguous statements made by Federal Reserve governors to prevent the markets from overreacting to their comments. Alan Greenspan is most well known for this technique, and when speaking to a US senator who claimed to have understood what he just said, he replied, "In that case, I must have misspoken." In 1965, Joseph Flanders, police reporter of the Charlotte News, wrote an article about Freddie Lee Haar, who came home in the middle of the night after a bomb threat at his place of work, only to be shot by his uncle, who presumably thought he was an intruder. Joseph wrote in the paper, quote, "It was as if some occult hand had moved pawn after pawn until they were in the right place, and then tragedy." His colleagues were amused by this line and decided to include the occult hand in their own writings, and so began the Order of the Occult Hand. The phrase has been used in various newspaper media around the world, with the most recent example being in February 2024, when James Card wrote, "The snow-melting temperatures during the February 3rd to 4th weekend created an eerie and long-lingering midday fog, as if some occult hand had moved Mother Nature's thermostat." The Republic of Molossia is an unrecognized micronation located in Dayton, Nevada in the US. It was founded in 1977 by Kevin Bow, who dreamed of creating a micronation since he was a teenager and decided to buy land in 1998 in an attempt to make it happen. The nation has its own currency, the Valora, and its own laws. For example, it's illegal to play percussion instruments in bathrooms and also to detonate any nuclear device. The punishment is a 500 Valora fine, which is around $400. That's a relatively small punishment for a pretty big crime. Onions and spinach are also banned in Molossia because Kevin doesn't like them. The Polymath Project began in January 2009 when a mathematician named Timothy Gowers posted on his blog questioning, "Is massively collaborative mathematics possible?" He shared an unsolved math problem related to the Hales-Jewett theorem and asked readers to work together in the comments to try to solve it. This problem, now referred to as Polymath 1, was solved after 7 weeks, with the help of over 40 people, and a number of other projects have been launched since. Antarctica is the only continent with no permanent human habitation. However, there are settlements where research groups and other staff live for limited periods of time. The temporary population can be as high as 10,000 people. Although crime there is relatively rare, it's not unheard of, and isolation and boredom as well as alcoholism are thought to be contributing factors. Crimes that have occurred in Antarctica include drug use, SA and harassment, attempted murder, arson, and torturing and killing wildlife. One particularly interesting incident was the death of an Australian astrophysicist named Rodney Marks. He began experiencing fever, stomach pains and nausea on the 11th of May 2000 and died the following day. Initially, he was thought to have died of natural causes. However, an autopsy conducted 6 months later determined that his cause of death was methanol poisoning. No one knows how he was poisoned or by who, if anyone else was involved. Shreel kill notes are small pieces of paper that have been discovered in various food, medicine, and other products from stores like Walmart, Target, Aldi, and Trader Joe's. Some have been found in parks and hiking trails, usually hanging from trees or stuck to railings. The notes started in 2019, possibly even as far back as 2015, and contain text that seems like gibberish and relate to various conspiracy theories involving the CIA, the European Union, Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump, the British royal family, and many other subjects. No one really knows who is creating these notes or why. Two of the main theories are that it's being done by someone with schizophrenia, or more disturbingly, it's the work of a secret society or cult who have access to a packaging facility. However, it's not clear how an individual with such severe delusions would be able to get away with this for so long, or if it was a cult, what their intention is, particularly when there doesn't appear to be any way to recruit people in the notes. Otherkin is defined as a person who identifies as non-human, typically as being wholly or partially an animal or mythical being. While many of these people acknowledge they are physically human, they may identify as a variety of creatures, including aliens, elves, wolves, dragons, foxes, and sometimes even fictional characters. Some believe their identity is due to spiritual phenomena, such as having a non-human soul, whereas others explain their identities with unusual psychology or as part of dissociative identity disorder. In mythology, Pua Aeternus is a child god who is eternally young. The psychologist Carl Jung also used the term to describe an adult who is socially and emotionally immature. These adults are sometimes described as having Peter Pan syndrome and typically display irresponsible and narcissistic behaviour. It's not a clinical diagnosis and is not listed in the DSM-5. People with this syndrome may be diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, though they don't always express such a high level of self-importance and entitlement. While the causes aren't fully known, it's thought to be rooted in childhood experiences and seems more common in people who were neglected as children or those who had very overprotective parents. In Moroccan folklore, door dogs are small, silent dogs that are seen following people shortly before their death as they are walking through doorways. While they can be seen by other people, no one can see their own door dog until they die. Chimerism is a genetic condition where some cells or tissues in a person's body contain at least two different sets of DNA. A person with this condition is known as a chimera. There are various causes. For example, when a woman is pregnant with twins, one dies and the other absorbs its twin cells. A person can also become a chimera after having a bone marrow transplant because the donated marrow continues to produce blood cells containing the donor's DNA. Only around 100 cases have been documented, though some experts estimate that up to 10% of the population could be chimeras. Many WWE wrestlers have had weird gimmicks, meaning their in-ring persona, background story, costumes, or traits. Some examples include Ron Rice, known as the Yeti, who, when the Ice thawed, was revealed to be a mummy who got involved in a match between Hulk Hogan and the Giant. Mike Halleck in some kind of bovine costume as Mantor, who would headbutt, maul, and even moo at his opponents. Natalia, who for a brief time in 2012 suddenly developed a farting problem, and one of the worst gimmicks, especially what happened later, was Joey Ryan's private parts. In matches, he would get opponents locked onto it so he could flip them or temporarily paralyze them. A few years ago, a number of women made a total of 17 allegations against Joey, including SA and grooming underage girls. The Vols subreddit is dedicated to, you guessed it, Vols. It was created by someone who calls himself Bunhine Butler, a radio host and cryptic hunter, and he claims it's the internet's largest Vols forum, which is probably true. This isn't an educational subreddit for the purpose of teaching about these animals though. In fact, I have no idea why it was created in the first place, but most of the top posts are photos of various things that are definitely not voles, from penguins to broccoli, with titles such as Cool Vole Picture and The Most Beautiful Vole. Bunhein often makes bizarre posts, ranting about the trolls and telling people to stop. In one post 2 years ago, he posted a photo of his crashed truck with the title, "Just so everyone knows what the trolls do to me. Last night I was driving to A&W after the interview when I crashed my truck trying to ban so many of you idiots and morons, and in general trying to pretty well much make the forum go public." I really don't know if he's serious or just playing a character. I'd recommend checking out the subreddit and making your own mind up. According to the Universal Book of Mathematics, a schizophrenic number is, quote, "an informal name for an irrational number that displays such persistent patterns in its decimal expansion that it has the appearance of a rational number." Cryptophasia refers to a language or a communication pattern developed by twins that only they can understand. Some level of cryptophasia occurs in up to 50% of twins and usually begins when they are toddlers. They often lose the shared language as they are exposed to more people outside the home who usually all speak the same language, though some twins continue to communicate in this way and the language becomes enriched over time. One famous and mysterious example is June and Jennifer Gibbons, who went to school in Wales in the 1970s, where they were bullied for their speech impediments. After this, they stopped speaking apart from to each other. No one else, including their parents, could understand the language they communicated in. In 1981, when they were 19, they were sent to Broadmoor, a notorious high-security psychiatric hospital in England, after committing various crimes including arson and theft. During their 11-year stay at Broadmoor, they became convinced that it was necessary for one of them to die. They had a long-standing agreement that if one of them died, the other must start speaking to others again and live a normal life. Jennifer decided to sacrifice herself, and one day began acting strangely, slurring her speech and telling June that she was dying. The next day, when they arrived at a less restrictive hospital in Wales that they'd been transferred to, Jennifer became unconscious. She was taken to hospital but died soon after due to acute myocarditis, a sudden inflammation of the heart. An autopsy revealed no signs of drugs or poison in her system, and the circumstances leading up to her death make it even more mysterious. Honouring the agreement she had made with her sister, June went on to live a normal life after this. She was never hospitalised again, nor did she commit any more crimes, and she even did various interviews, including with Harper's Bazaar and The Guardian. The Man of the Hull was an indigenous man who lived alone in the Amazon rainforest. After most of the other inhabitants of the Taranau Indigenous Territory had been killed in the 1970s in the ongoing genocide, the rest were killed in an attack by illegal miners in 1995, leaving only this man left. He was discovered in 1996 by FUNAI, the Brazilian government's agency for indigenous interests, and they monitored him throughout the rest of his life and tried to prevent anyone from going near him or harming him. They would also leave tools and seeds for him, so he was aware he was being monitored. In return, the man would give signals to the monitoring teams so they avoided any traps he had created. He was seen periodically moving around the rainforest, building straw huts, hunting and collecting fruits. Although the man occasionally had some kind of brief contact with the observing teams, they never actually spoke to each other, and no one knows what language the man spoke. Despite FUNAI's attempts to protect the man, he was attacked by gunmen in November 2009, but thankfully managed to survive until the 24th of August 2022, when a FUNAI agent found the man dead in his most recent home, quote, lying down in the hammock and ornamented with macaw feathers as if waiting for death. He is believed to have died of natural causes the month prior and was likely around 60 years old. On the 1st of June 2004, a 12-year-old schoolgirl named Satomi Mitarai was murdered with a utility knife by her 11-year-old classmate, known only as Girl A, in an elementary school in Sasebo, Japan. After the murder, Girl A returned to her classroom covered in blood, and when she was being interviewed by police, she confessed to the crime and kept saying sorry. She burst into tears many times and refused to eat or drink. At first, she gave no motive for the murder, but eventually admitted that the pair had an argument after Satomi had slandered her online. Due to her age, she was institutionalized for 2 years, and this was later extended by another 2 years after a psychological evaluation deemed that she wasn't ready to be released. She was released in 2008, and not much is known about her life since then. The incident has since become known as the Nevada Tan murder or the Sasebo slashing. The Pit of Despair was a device designed by a psychologist named Harry Harlow, whose career had mostly focused on studying maternal bonding until 1971, when his wife died of cancer and he began suffering with depression. When he returned to work, his colleagues noticed a change in him. He abandoned his previous research, and his work began focusing on the effects of isolation and depression. He designed an experiment with rhesus monkeys to study this, and placed a number of them aged between 3 months and 3 years alone in the Pit of Despair. This device was a large vertical cone-shaped structure made from stainless steel with a floor of wire mesh. The monkeys were fed and given water, but mostly left alone for weeks at a time, with no stimulation of any kind or contact with other monkeys or even humans. Within days, most of them would remain huddled at the side of the pit, barely moving and making no noises. When they were removed from the pit, this behaviour persisted. They would no longer play, interact socially, or show signs of curiosity as they had before, and as is normal for monkeys. Harry had intended to create an animal model of depression with hopes that it could lead to better understanding of the condition and improve treatments for it, but it certainly did him no good, as he died in 1981 after suffering with severe depression and alcoholism for years. A rat king is a collection of rats or mice who would become attached after their tails got entangled, possibly due to them being tied together or stuck with something like gum or glue. There isn't much evidence suggesting that this can occur naturally, so the existence of rat kings is debatable, but they have been reported in various countries, mostly European countries, since 1564. Ganser syndrome, also known as prisoner syndrome, is a type of factitious disorder that was first observed in prisoners when they would deliberately act like they had physical or mental illnesses, such as schizophrenia, when they aren't really ill. Unlike, say, Munchausen disorder, people with Ganser syndrome have short-term episodes where they may pretend to be confused, disorientated, claim they are hallucinating, claim they are experiencing amnesia, and give nonsense answers to simple questions. This condition is not listed in the DSM, and it's a pretty controversial diagnosis because many argue that it's nothing to do with mental illness, but rather a sort of defense against legal punishment. Onioroid syndrome is a rare form of psychosis which, according to the National Institute of Health, is characterized by, quote, a kaleidoscopic quality of psychopathological experiences wherein reality, illusions, and hallucinations are merged into one. It is typically accompanied by motor and, in particular, catatonic disturbances. Onioroid syndrome is not listed in the DSM-5 as most psychologists categorize it as a form of catatonic schizophrenia. One case study involved an Indian man who was observed for 20 days and felt like he was living many centuries in the past during a vague period of ancient kings. A few minutes later, this delusion would end and he would feel like he was in the present again. The The private parts of a deer are used in traditional Chinese medicine for a variety of purposes, such as to increase strength and improve problems a couple may be having in the bedroom. Athletes have also been known to consume it soaked in alcohol because it's purportedly an effective remedy for injuries and of course for its strength-enhancing properties. China banned the wine during the 2008 Summer Olympics, which were held in Beijing, alongside turtle blood and angelica root because they class these products as stimulants. Some East Asian people perform a ritual which involves burning fake banknotes made from joss paper, also known as hell money. These notes are made to resemble real notes, such as Thai baht or Vietnamese dong, and are burnt as offerings to the deceased to resolve any monetary problems they may be having in the afterlife. Parapsychology is the study of psychic phenomena, including telepathy, clairvoyance, and telekinesis. In this field, there is an experiment that supposedly tests for telepathy, named the Ganzfeld experiment. One person attempts to send an image telepathically to another person who is in a state of sensory deprivation, and this person has to choose the image being sent between a number of options. Proponents claim that this experiment has achieved results more successful than what would occur through chance alone, and therefore it should serve as evidence of telepathy. However, these results may well have been influenced by researcher bias, if not outright fabricated, as attempts to independently replicate them have not been consistent, and the experiment is generally considered to be pseudoscientific. Psychoanalyst Carl Jung proposed the concept of the shadow, which is the hidden, uncivilized, even primitive part of our psyche, which may contain anger, sadness, laziness, deception, and other negative traits. Everyone has a shadow, but they may not realize it, and this can lead to projection. For example, if you feel that your friends don't help you enough because they're all self-absorbed and selfish, it might actually be you who is selfish, demanding too much time from others, not realizing they have their own lives to focus on, and not recognizing or appreciating the help they already gave you. Carl Jung believed that shadow work is crucial in the process of self-actualization, and while some parts of your shadow should be hidden from others, they should never be hidden from yourself. The Holders series is a collection of short stories about 538 objects which, if brought together, will cause the end of the world as we know it. There were originally 2,538 of these objects, but 2,000 of them were lost. The details of what will happen if the remaining objects come together are apparently so horrendous that it would drive most people mad. The objects are kept by what are known as holders, who live in different locations around the world, and if you find one, you'll be forced to undergo a test of power to earn an object. There have been no new stories in the series for quite some time now, so it seems the creators have abandoned the project. Interior Design is the title of one of 3 segments in Tokyo, a 2008 anthology film. This story centers around Hiroko and Akira, a young couple who moved to Tokyo so Akira can pursue his dream as a filmmaker. His film eventually screens, and one of the spectators talks to Hiroko about the struggles in a relationship between 2 creatives. One will usually feel invisible and unappreciated. Hiroko relates to this and starts questioning her role in the relationship. One morning, she wakes up to find a hole in her chest with a wooden pole down the middle. She goes outside, and as she's walking, the hole continues to grow. Eventually, she turns into an inanimate chair. One man tries to take the chair home, and when he looks away, it transforms back into the human Hiroko, so she runs away. She realizes that she can only be in human form when no one sees her. Eventually, a musician takes the chair to his apartment and takes good care of her. When he's out, she can transform back into the human Hiroko. Seemingly accepting her new life, she writes a letter to Akira wishing him the best in his career. The Publius Enigma is an internet mystery that began in June 1994 when a Usenet user named Publius posted on the alt music Pink Floyd group, inviting fans to examine the music and album artwork on Pink Floyd's latest album, The Division Bell. Publius stated that although all music is subject to multiple interpretations, the division bell has a central purpose and a design solution, and whoever figures out what that is will be awarded a unique prize. The following month, they posted again, stating that a clue would appear in flashing white lights, and 2 days later, at one of Pink Floyd's concerts, the lights on stage briefly spelled out Enigma Publius. In 2002, guitarist David Gilmour revealed that Publius Enigma was instigated by the record company, specifically by one man working for them who loved puzzles. Apparently it was never solved, and so the prize was never given out. Drummer Nick Mason said, quote, "The prize was something like a crop of trees planted in a clear-cut area of forest, or something to that effect. It was not to be a prize of some tangible thing, but rather a touchy-feely sort of gift that was more of a philanthropic thing than something you could hang on a wall." The Voynich manuscript is thought to date back to the 15th century and is a codex written in an unknown language and script. There are illustrations of plants, people, astronomical diagrams, and various other imagery, including what looks to be a castle and a dragon. It was rediscovered by a rare book dealer in 1912, and to this day, no one has successfully deciphered it, nor has anyone determined for sure what its purpose is. Auditor was a feral dog who lived in the area around an open-pit copper mine in Monana, USA. The miners would give him food and water, but he usually tried to avoid human contact as much as possible. Still, he was known to appear when least expected, hence the name Auditor. He was first seen in 1986 and died in November 2003, so he lived at least 17 years. You may remember a few years ago when Alex Jones went on a rant about chemicals being put in the water that, quote, "turn the frickin' frogs gay." This clip pretty quickly went viral, and even meme songs were made from it. Now, it's not true that the government is deliberately putting chemicals in the water to turn the frickin' frogs gay, but Alex was probably referring to chemicals such as atrazine, a widely used pesticide that has been shown to induce sex change or hermaphroditism in frogs, possibly due to its endocrine disrupting properties. It is worth noting that frogs can spontaneously change sex in non-polluted water anyway, but this does seem to increase in the presence of atrazine, which ends up in the water due to its use as a pesticide, not because the government is intentionally polluting it for that purpose. For many years, conspiracy theories have spread various theories about Denver Airport. Most of these have something to do with secret government bases, the New World Order, and aliens. The airport has even held events and marketing campaigns themed around these conspiracies as a way of making fun of them, or to cover up what's really going on. Who knows? Indigo children is a pseudo-scientific New Age concept that refers to children who supposedly have special and unique traits and abilities that may allow them to revolutionize the world and awaken humanity. Characteristics may include being creative and easily bored, intuitive, misunderstood, and strong-willed. This is quite a controversial concept because some medical professionals believe that parents may attribute certain characteristics to a child being an indigo child, when in actuality they may have a developmental disorder, such as ADHD, which may require treatment. Physiognomy is the pseudo-scientific practice of assessing a person's character or personality from their physical appearance, especially their facial features. It dates back to the Middle Ages, and in the past has even been used to identify potential criminals. There are various different suggestions within physiognomy, with some believing that if a person's face resembles an animal, they might share personality traits with that animal, and others focusing more on specific features such as a prominent chin, meaning they are strong-willed, or wide-set eyes, suggesting an adventurous personality. While there is no scientific basis behind this, and it's not used in criminology today, I wouldn't say the belief has totally died out, and I'd argue that we unconsciously make judgments about a person's character based on their physical appearance all the time. For example, saying someone has kind eyes or a friendly face. CRISPR, short for Clustered Regularly Interspaced Short Palindromic Repeats, is a gene editing tool that allows scientists to cut and modify DNA sequences. Aside from its uses in agriculture, such as developing crops that are more resistant to pests and climate change, it also has various potential benefits for humans too, such as correcting faulty genes that cause diseases like sickle cell anemia. CRISPR also has the potential to extend life expectancy by reversing aging and rejuvenating stem cells. In the 1950s and 60s, ethologist John B. Calhoun conducted a number of studies on rats using what he called rat utopias, enclosed spaces where the rats were given unlimited food and water. Without food shortage and the presence of predators, the rat utopias effectively enabled uninhibited population growth, and the results were surprising, to say the least. Many female rats were unable to carry pregnancies to full term or survive giving birth, and if they did, they often lacked maternal functions. Males showed a number of disturbing behavioural abnormalities, such as sexual deviation and cannibalism. Many also withdrew from the society, avoiding socialising and only going out to eat and drink when the others were asleep. In the first series of experiments, there was a development of what Calhoun called a behavioural sink, which he described, quote, "The animals would crowd together in greatest number in one of the 4 interconnecting pens in which the colony was maintained. As many as 60 of the 80 rats in each experimental population would assemble in one of the pens during periods of feeding. Individual rats would rarely eat except in the company of other rats. As a result, extreme population densities developed in the pen adopted for eating, leaving the others with sparse populations. In the experiments in which the behavioural sink developed, infant mortality ran as high as 96% among the most disoriented groups in the population." The results of the study led to concerns that unchecked population growth in humans could cause societal collapse. The true crime community could include anyone who makes videos or posts etc. online about true crime, including myself and anyone else who engages with such content. However, there are some people in the community who take their fascination to the extreme, to the point where they are glorifying and romanticising serial killers, fangirling over them like they're celebrities. If you search for this somewhere like Tumblr, you can find various posts from people making so-called cute artwork of some of the most depraved criminals, and even thirst trap edits. Monsanto was one of the first companies to introduce genes into plants and then to conduct field trials of genetically modified crops. It held patents on GMO seeds, especially those resistant to certain herbicides, and filed lawsuits against farmers who reproduced these seeds through planting and harvesting. One of the most well-known examples was Baumann v. Monsanto in 2013. Vernon Baumann, a farmer from Indiana, bought a batch of soybean seeds under a limited use license that prohibited him from using the seeds for more than a single season, or from saving any seeds produced by the crops for replanting in the future. Vernon lost the case as the Supreme Court ruled that when a farmer plants a harvested and saved seed, it counts as an unauthorized reproduction of the patented product. Toxoplasmosis is an infection of a parasite called Toxoplasma gondii. It can occur after eating undercooked meat and also through contact with cat feces. Most people who get toxoplasmosis don't have any symptoms if their immune systems are functioning normally, but those who do may experience flu-like symptoms, muscle aches and pains, and severe cases may even cause damage to the brain, eyes, and other organs. There is even some research potentially linking the parasite with mental illnesses such as schizophrenia, bipolar, and OCD, as well as behavioural changes. The Turner Diaries is a 1978 novel written by Andrew MacDonald, a pseudonym used by William Luther Pierce, who was the founder of a white nationalist group known as the National Alliance. The novel has been referred to by some as the white supremacist Bible, and it centers around a violent revolution in the US caused by a group called the Organization, who aim to exterminate all non-white and Jewish people in the world. It's banned in a number of countries such as Canada and France for obvious reasons. Toronto Protocol refers to a cancer surveillance system that helps to detect tumours early and is particularly promising for people with an inherited disorder called Li-Fraumeni syndrome, which causes a higher lifetime risk of developing various cancers such as bone cancer and leukemia. The protocol involves a combination of tests, including blood tests, ultrasounds, and annual MRIs, that after detecting tumours can enable quicker treatment and in turn can improve overall survival rates. A concrete enema is exactly what it sounds like. Thankfully though, this doesn't appear to be a trend, and this entry is probably referring to an isolated case in 1987 involving a 20-year-old man who went to the hospital due to rectal pain. A few hours prior, he and his boyfriend had made a batch of concrete, and his boyfriend poured the mixture into him through a funnel. Doctors were able to remove the concrete without causing any damage, and were surprised to find a ping pong ball mixed in with the concrete, though the patient didn't explain why that was in there. A corporate kill list is a hypothesized list created by corporations that contains names of people who are thought to pose a threat to their interests, such as whistleblowers. This is basically a conspiracy theory because very few people have been confirmed to have been killed by corporations to silence them, but there are various deaths that many believe did occur in this way. One recent example is John Barnett, a Boeing whistleblower, who publicly spoke about his safety concerns. In March 2024, he was found dead in his truck. The official manner of death was self-inflicted, though for obvious reasons, many believe he was actually killed by Boeing. In 1956, the Alaska Mental Health Enabling Act was passed in an attempt to improve mental health care in Alaska, USA. Prior to this, there were no mental health treatment facilities in Alaska, and people who were determined by a jury to be mentally ill were often just sent to prison. The bill was pretty controversial though, with some believing it would lead to people not suffering with mental illness being thrown in an asylum by a greedy relative or friend. Some even believed it was part of a communist plot to hospitalize and brainwash American citizens. Cuvade syndrome is a condition in which a man experiences some of the same symptoms as his pregnant partner, including weight gain, morning sickness, labour pains, and postpartum depression. The cause of the symptoms are not clear, with some suggesting it's a psychosomatic condition and others believing it's due to hormone changes. Christine Chubbuck was an American news reporter who was the first person to die from a self-inflicted cause on live TV. She had struggled with depression for much of her life and had attempted to end it 4 years before she succeeded in 1974. Christine had never had a romantic relationship before. She'd never been on more than 2 dates with a man and was still a virgin, and it's thought that this was a contributing factor. The footage of her death was totally lost until 2021, when a YouTuber uploaded what is widely believed to be the audio from the broadcast, though the video has never been publicly released. Rumination syndrome is a rare behavioral disorder in which a person repeatedly regurgitates undigested or partially digested food due to involuntary contraction of the muscles around the abdomen. Treatment usually involves medicine or behavioral therapy. According to an urban legend that originated in Mississippi, there was an outbreak of mercritis in the 1950s, which was an infectious disease that was caused by ingesting large amounts of lead. When a man would consume too much lead, from paint or other sources, it caused him to secrete a chemical that turned women crazy and made them start killing people. After the outbreak, the incident was supposedly covered up by the government. A feral child is a child who has been isolated from human contact from a very young age. Perhaps the most famous case was Victor of Aveyron, who was found living in the woods in Aveyron, France, at the estimated age of 9. It's not known how he ended up there, though he'd clearly spent the majority of his life in isolation. He was captured multiple times and taken in by different people, though ran away back to the woods about 8 separate times, until January 1800, when he emerged on his own. He reportedly walked on all fours and was initially thought to be deaf and mute. Attempts to educate him weren't very successful. Although he showed some level of understanding in learning language and reading, he only ever learned to spell 2 phrases. He died in 1828 at around 40 years old. Although some who had studied his case at the time wondered if he had always lived a wild life in the forest, more recent analysis highlights that it isn't plausible that a child could survive with no nurturing from other humans until at least the age of 5 or 6, and it's arguably more likely that he was dumped by his parents after they neglected and abused him for a number of years. On the 15th of September 2010, the body of 55-year-old Greg Fleniken was found in their Elegant Hotel in Beaumont, Texas, after he failed to check out earlier that day. It initially looked like he died of natural causes, considering there were no signs of forced entry or anything else at the scene that might suggest someone else was involved. The autopsy determined that his cause of death was a heart attack. However, it certainly didn't appear to have been as a result of natural causes. Greg had severe internal damage, with broken ribs, lacerations in the liver and scrotum, and a hole in the heart, which the medical examiner believed had been caused by blunt force trauma, and so the death was ruled a homicide. Before I reveal what happened here, I will recommend reading the Vanity Fair article titled "The Body in Room 348" if you want to know the full story, and feel free to skip on to the next entry in this iceberg to avoid spoilers. Anyway, it turned out that Greg had been shot, but it wasn't an intentional murder. When investigators questioned Tim Steinmetz, an electrician who had been staying in the room next to Greg, he eventually admitted that his co-worker, Lance Muller, who was also in the room that night, had been playing with his gun while he was drunk and it had accidentally fired. The bullet had gone through the wall between the 2 rooms and hit Greg. Lance didn't realise that he'd shot anyone, and when police came to check the room, the bullet hole had been hidden behind the door. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Itai Itai, translated from Japanese, is "it hurts, it hurts." Itai Itai disease was the name given to a mass cadmium poisoning by locals who began experiencing symptoms around 1912. It occurred due to mining in Toyama Prefecture, which was increased when the Russo-Japanese War and World War I heightened the demand for raw materials. As a result, between 1910 and 1945, cadmium was released in much greater quantities than before. Cadmium poisoning caused severe pain in the joints and bones, softening of the bones, and kidney failure. In 1968, 29 people, 9 with the disease and the other 20 family members, sued the Mitsui Mining and Smelting Company, and 3 years later, the company was found guilty. They agreed to pay the medical bills of those who had been poisoned, as well as reparations. A tulpa is a materialized being or thought form created through spiritual practice and intense mental focus. The concept originated in Tibetan Buddhism, and you could somewhat compare a tulpa to an imaginary friend, though practitioners view them as real beings that develop their own identities and personalities separate from their creators. Ayrton Senna was a Brazilian Formula One driver who died in May 1994 when his car crashed into a concrete barrier while he was competing in the San Marino Grand Prix. The crash was determined to have been caused by the steering column snapping as Ayrton was driving around the corner. The vast majority of people believe this explanation and never doubted that it was a tragic accident. However, someone posted online in 2008 suggesting that he was murdered by a sniper. This theory is based on the footage of the incident cutting out right before the car hits the wall, and there supposedly being a bullet hole in the visor of his helmet, but hardly any other damage. This person also claimed that the steering column was only cracked 20%, and that wouldn't be enough to compromise steering. They then tied the alleged murder in with the Illuminati, and honestly, it all sounds very implausible. It seems to be a pretty obscure theory, and I wasn't able to find much information online, but it was discussed in a forum post on f1technical.net titled Ayrton Senna Murdered, so you can check that out if you want a few more details. The despair code originated on 4chan, and it's a string of numbers that supposedly causes a person to slowly descend into madness after they are exposed to it. Obviously it isn't real. I was first exposed to the code years ago, and I can confirm I haven't gone crazy, yet. I don't know if it was first shared by someone who actually believed it though, or if it was a joke all along. Rapid onset obesity with hypothalamic dysregulation, hypoventilation, and autonomic dysregulation, or ROHAD for short, is a rare condition that typically begins between the age of 1 to 11. There are less than 200 cases reported worldwide, and not much is known about it, including what causes it, though it has been suggested that there is a genetic cause. The bizarrely long name itself includes some of the symptoms of this condition, and in addition, patients may also experience neuroendocrine tremors and behavioral issues. Hypoventilation is perhaps the most dangerous symptom, as it can cause cardiopulmonary arrest if not treated quick enough. At least 50% of patients with ROHAD are thought to have died due to this. Oikeiosis refers to the Stoic philosophical process of recognizing something as belonging to yourself and ultimately expanding this recognition to a broader sense of belonging to humanity. The process begins with self-preservation and progresses into concern for others and developing a sense of responsibility for your community as a whole. It is a natural process for humans in general, who as babies are only concerned with their own needs, before they then develop concern and loyalty for their family, and eventually some level of concern for the well-being of everyone. However, Stoics believe that practicing oikeiosis will lead to a more fulfilling life and a better world for everyone. Virus 23 is similar to the despair code in that when you hear the words, it begins to infiltrate your mind. It's like a virus of the mind that causes you to progressively lose your sanity without you actually realizing it. It predates the despair code by many years and is thought to have been the inspiration for the despair code. According to one description, quote, "Please abandon all hope of either cure or escape. You have no thought that is not already your own. When you have finished reading the remaining 19 words, this process of irreversible infection will be completed and you will depart, believing yourself largely unaffected by this process." Golf rumours is a conspiracy theory that seems to have originated on 4chan, though some say it was a troll entry that appeared in a conspiracy theory iceberg that Anons on X made a backstory for. According to one comment, quote, At the PGA tournament 2009, a Politico journalist apparently attended some after-party and discovered occult shit happening in basement. Not just your normal LARPing Satanist wannabes, but some truly sick shit. She posted a story about it, which was immediately taken down, presumably after the powers that be threatened her. There was more chatter than they were comfortable with in online golf forums, which are now deleted, and a few days after the Tiger Woods scandal was posted by National Enquirer. Tiger Woods ruined his image to bury this story. There was more info on it on some Onion site, but I can't seem to find it. All surface web traces of it have now been wiped outside of threads like this. It goes deeper than most know. Holotropic breathwork is a method of inducing an altered state of consciousness via rapid, controlled breathing. The goal is to access the hidden parts of the psyche to facilitate healing from past traumas and increase spiritual development. This entry, Psych Wards as Prisons, is referring to individuals who have been deemed unfit to stand trial after they committed a crime, and instead are held in psychiatric wards for a long period of time, possibly for life. One example is Arion Kurtaj, an 18-year-old who was part of a cybercrime gang. He was already on bail for hacking NVIDIA and BT/EE when he hacked Rockstar and leaked various clips of the next Grand Theft Auto game. Doctors decided he was unfit to stand trial due to his severe autism, and so the jury were told to determine whether or not he committed the alleged acts, not if he did so with criminal intent. He was found guilty and sentenced to an indefinite hospital order, meaning he will spend the rest of his life in a secure hospital unless doctors decide he is no longer a danger. Back in the 90s, there was a chainmail that claimed that reading or hearing the words solar plexus clown gliders made you susceptible to infection by these parasitic entities. The sickness was supposedly comparable to meth withdrawal symptoms, including hallucinations and psychosis. In occult practices, a hypersigil is an elaborate symbol that holds magical powers, such as a painting, a song, or a poem. It's created to symbolize an intention or something you want to manifest in your life, and creating it in your likeness makes it more likely to happen in real life. For example, if you wanted to be rich, you could paint a photo of yourself with lots of money, and this will help you to manifest it. The effect is also heightened when other people see it, and so give their energy to it as well. 973 EHTNAMUH 973 is a strange, cryptic website that initially looks like gibberish, but features various different puzzles and mathematical equations. It's also full of religious symbolism and has whole pages dedicated to Bible passages. It was created in the early 2000s, and to this day, some people are still trying to work out what it all means and why. Demonology is the study of demons in myth and religion. There are people who claim to have summoned demons by rituals involving incantations, spells, sigils, and sacrifices, and once the demon has appeared, one can make a deal where the summoner offers it something in exchange for the demon's services or knowledge. Some even worship demons and may choose one specific demon to worship based on what they can do. In June 2014, a 4chan Anon posted on their X board about his friend who had recently sent his computer in for repair because he thought he downloaded a virus. He kept finding images and documents in his download folder that he never knowingly downloaded. Around this time, strange things began happening, such as issues with lights and the TV turning itself on and off. So OP was asking 4chan if it's possible for a paranormal entity to mess with the computer, or if the computer could be the original source of whatever is going on in the house. In the comments, OP began posting some of the photos that had appeared on his friend's computer. The first few initially just looked like random patterns in black and red, until one Anon suggested putting them together and it turns out it makes a face, which you can see on screen now. Another image posted by OP looked kind of like a part of a QR code, but it wouldn't scan. Another user somehow figured out that it was binary code, and when converted into words, it read, "I am God." Mary Ann McLean and Robert de Grimstone, both from England, first met in the early 1960s when they were members of the Church of Scientology. It didn't take long for them to be kicked out of the church, and they both got married in 1963. Shortly after, they started Compulsions Analysis, a Scientology splinter group which followed the basic Scientology principles but also included some new elements. This didn't last too long, but it did develop into the Process Church, which they founded in London in 1966. Within a couple of months, the church had gained a small following, and 25 members soon moved into a commune in Mayfair. Eventually, later that year, they all moved to Mexico, though after a hurricane destroyed their settlement, most moved back to London. Mary and Robert spent the next few years travelling around the world and opening new branches, mostly in US cities, but also in Germany and Italy. By the early 1970s, the Process Church was estimated to have a few hundred active members. However, the reputation of the church had been damaged by the suggestion of a connection to Charles Manson by prosecutors who were investigating the Manson family murders. Any connections between the church and the Manson family have never been proven, but the allegations seem to have signalled the beginning of the end for the church. Mary and Robert eventually divorced, and when they couldn't agree on the direction of the Process Church, they separated into two groups, though most of the members chose to stick with Mary. Her church changed names and beliefs a few times over the years before she eventually established an animal rescue centre that after a few years removed all references to religion from its statutes. She died in 2005. Robert abandoned his church in 1979 and then moved professionally into business. Prison labour is the practice of using prisoners to perform various types of work, either for the government or private industries, doing jobs like manufacturing goods and working in maintenance. In the US, slavery is illegal except as a punishment for a convicted criminal, and prison labour is allowed in most states, generating significant economic output. Prisoners typically earn around 12 to 40 cents per hour. Proponents believe that prison labour allows inmates to learn skills that can boost their chances of finding employment when they are released. However, the practice is controversial, with some arguing that it's exploitation and that slavery is still slavery, whether someone has committed a crime or not. They also believe that it prioritises profits for corporations over rehabilitation. In yogic philosophy, Kundalini syndrome refers to symptoms that may arise after a spiritual awakening, involving the activation of dormant energy that is supposedly trapped at the base of the spine. The syndrome can present as psychosis, and symptoms include hallucinations, disordered thoughts and behaviours, and persistent involuntary movements. Love Has Won is a new religious movement based in America that was founded by Amy Carlson in 2006 and led by her until she died in 2021. It's considered to be a cult by many, including ex-members who left the group and revealed what it was like. Members would refer to Amy as Mother God, and they believed she was a 19 billion-year-old divine being who had created the universe and everything in it, though her physical body had died many times, and her soul had been reincarnated hundreds of times, as Jesus, Cleopatra, even Marilyn Monroe, among other well-known figures throughout history. The group had some pretty controversial beliefs, many of them centering around disproven conspiracy theories, such as various terrorist attacks being planned and the Holocaust being a hoax. Amy lived with a group of 12 to 20 members in a small town in Colorado, and they would often stream online to recruit new members and gain donations. A number of ex-members have spoken about the abuse they experienced while in the group. In April 2021, Amy's mummified corpse was discovered weeks after she had died in a makeshift shrine. The autopsy revealed that alcohol abuse, anorexia, and chronic colloidal silver ingestion had all contributed to her death. Mudflood is a conspiracy theory about the existence of Tartaria, an advanced empire that apparently spanned most of Asia and Russia until around 100 years ago, when it was destroyed by a colossal mudflood and covered up by the nations that still exist today. According to the theory, Tartaria had technology much more advanced than we have today, with revolutionary transportation and free energy. Tartaria is actually a historical name for Central Asia and Siberia, though the mudflood theory ignores well-documented accounts of the region and adds many fabricated, mysterious details. It has been debunked as an extremist fantasy. Rocco's basilisk is a thought experiment that theorizes that any future AI entity may want to punish anyone who knew of or predicted its existence but didn't directly contribute to its development or advancement. I guess this entry, Rocco's basilisk is the despair code, is suggesting that the thought experiment is another example of a despair code, because after you hear about it, you don't really have any excuse for not contributing to AI if the proposed scenario actually occurs in the future, and therefore you may be punished. I wasn't able to find any information online about the Kaliki scenario, at least not relevant to what the entry seems to be referring to. However, the Reddit user who created this iceberg stated the following in a comment. Anti-Kaliki is basically a reverse Kaliki scenario. A Kaliki scenario is basically a population reaches a point of despair where they can't take it, which usually causes society to fall in around a month. Anti-Kaliki is just the inverse. LoveShack OS is an operating system developed by a man named Sean Cook, who claimed it contains the great truth of the universe within the code. The name was later changed to Lovebug SOS. A lot of Sean's content appears to have been removed over the years, but what remains is enough to show that he was likely suffering with some kind of mental illness, unless this whole thing was just an elaborate joke. He released a 186-page PDF file that's just full of incoherent rambling, so I personally lean towards the mental illness theory. There is a subreddit dedicated to him, Lovebug SOS, though it's been inactive for 3 years now, and it doesn't look like Sean has been active online during that time either. Red Enlightenment is the title of a book written by Graham Jones and published in May 2023. Here's an excerpt from the description. Why we need a materialist spirituality for the secular left and how to build one. The left commonly rejects religion and spirituality as counter-revolutionary forces, citing Marx's famous dictum that religion is the opium of the people. Yet forms of spirituality have motivated struggles throughout history, ranging from medieval peasant uprisings and colonial slave revolts to South American liberation theology and the US civil rights movement. And in a world where religion is growing and political movements are ridden with conflict, burnout and failure, what can the left learn from religion? Red Enlightenment argues not only for a deepened understanding of religious matters, but calls for the secular left to develop its own spiritual perspectives. It proposes a materialist spirituality built from socialist and scientific resources, finding points of contact with the global history of philosophy and religion. The concept of time crystals might be a little hard to wrap your head around. The best analogy I've found is between time crystals and clocks. So a clock ticks in repeating patterns, but if you remove the battery, it stops ticking because it's no longer receiving energy and is therefore in its resting state. Pretty much every object you can think of will be motionless in its lowest energy state. However, time crystals continue moving in their lowest energy states in a repeating pattern at exact intervals. So if a clock was a time crystal, you could remove the battery and it would still continue ticking, despite it having no source of energy. If I understand correctly, existing time crystals have been found, but no one has ever actually created a true time crystal that doesn't involve some input of energy. They have created ones that continue moving for much longer than you'd expect for the energy added though, 40 seconds from a weak laser pulse. PTSD Radio is a horror manga anthology that was initially published in 2010. It centers around an ancient legend of a being known as Ogushi, the god of hair, and the people who worship it. After releasing 6 volumes in the series, the creator, Masaki Nakayama, suddenly stopped publication in 2018 to preserve his own sanity after a number of worrying occurrences. When he rented a new workspace for himself and his team, they soon noticed a broken shrine nearby, which is an ominous sign in Japanese culture. Then they began experiencing paranormal activity, from lights turning on and off to scratching noises above them. They even reported seeing shadow figures moving around the building. Masaki eventually started getting physically ill. He was diagnosed with a rare condition causing severe bleeding that caused black gelatinous blood blisters to form on his lips, tongue and gums. Interestingly, one of the characters in PTSD Radio vomits blood that spawns demons. In 2018, shortly before he quit, half of his face swelled dramatically and his body temperature dropped significantly. It seems that this was the final straw, and he hasn't released any new volumes since. Bovine spongiform encephalopathy, or mad cow disease, is an incurable and fatal neurodegenerative prion disease of cattle. Onset is usually 4 to 5 years after exposure, and symptoms include abnormal behaviour, walking difficulties, weight loss, eventually progressing to an inability to move, and death within weeks to months of onset of symptoms. If BSE-infected beef is consumed by humans, this can result in variant Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, or VCJD, which has similar symptoms, as well as dementia, psychiatric problems, and hallucinations. Infection can also occur via blood transfusions and contaminated surgical equipment. As of 2018, 231 cases of VCJD had been reported globally, with 178 of these in the UK. Humans typically only survive around 13 months after the onset of symptoms, and as you can imagine, it's not a nice way to go. The scariest part is, as with BSE, onset of symptoms usually doesn't occur until years after exposure, so you'd have no idea you were infected until you suddenly start experiencing symptoms and nothing can be done to save you. The last known case of VCJD in the UK was reported in 2016, with a clinical onset in 2014, and a more recent case was reported in France in 2019, with onset in 2017. The most recent case of BSE, however, was less than 1 year ago in May 2024 on a farm in Scotland. Let's Make the Teacher Have a Miscarriage Club is the name of a Japanese thriller released in 2011. As the title suggests, the plot centers around a group of 5 girls in high school led by a psychopath who decides to make their teacher have a miscarriage after hearing she's pregnant. The film is only 62 minutes long and it has an IMDb rating of 5.4 out of 10. Robert Picton, also known as the Pig Farmer Killer, was a Canadian serial killer who confessed to murdering 49 people, though he was only convicted of 6 cases of second-degree murder. He inherited a farm in the early 1990s and would have wild parties there with as many as 2,000 guests. One of his employees found several purses belonging to missing women on Robert's property and reported him to the police. The 3 searches of the farm found no evidence of anything suspicious. In June 1999, police even received a tip that Robert had a freezer full of human flesh at the farm, but police ignored it and didn't bother conducting another search until 2002, after reports of illegal firearms. Robert and his brother were arrested, and police searched the farm again in relation to the missing women. This time, various personal items belonging to the women were found. Robert was eventually sentenced to life with no possibility of parole for 25 years. In 2004, the government revealed that Robert may have sold ground-up human flesh mixed with pork to the public. It was also suggested that he may have fed the victims' bodies to his pigs. He died in prison in May 2024 at the age of 74 after being attacked by another inmate. According to various testimonies over the years, there is a practice in prison known as V-coding, where staff will appease or reward male inmates for good behaviour by putting a transgender woman in a cell with them so they can SA her. This is supposedly a way to maintain social control and to keep the violence rate down. A study in California in 2021 reportedly found that 69% of trans women in prison reported being forced to perform inappropriate acts against their will, and if they refused, they'd be placed in solitary confinement or threatened with criminal charges of assault. The Kendler Project was an experiment started in the 1970s in Berlin by psychology professor Helmut Kendler, in which homeless children were sent to live with pedophile men. This was no accident. These men were known pedophiles, and Helmut believed that they would make especially loving foster parents. He believed that inappropriate contact between adults and children was harmless and even beneficial. Sudden arrhythmic death syndrome, or SADS, is a sudden unexpected death of an adult or adolescent caused by a cardiac arrest. It's not usually known what causes the cardiac arrest, but it usually happens when the person is resting or asleep. About 19% of people who died from SADS were not known to have experienced any symptoms whatsoever in the time running up to their deaths. One group of people particularly affected by SADS is the Laotian Hmong. An outbreak occurred in the 1970s and 80s, and some Hmong people believe that it was caused by disruptions to their religious rituals due to the Laotian Civil War. They believe that when they don't worship properly, the ancestor spirits don't protect them, leaving them vulnerable to attacks from evil spirits while they're sleeping, known as nocturnal pressing spirit attacks. These attacks are a type of sleep paralysis, and whether or not it's plausible that they really are caused by evil spirits, it has been suggested that this belief can result in SADS. Ascension Blacklist is the theory that some powerful people have knowledge of how to ascend to the next plane of existence, but they're blocking most people from doing so, and as a result, people are reincarnated again and again unless they can make it out of the blacklist. This idea is sometimes linked with conspiracy theories about secret societies, with some believing that these societies were created to keep the majority of the population blacklisted. The soul bank theory states that all souls have already been created, and when a human is conceived, one of these souls is transported into them. When a person dies, their soul returns to the soul bank. Some believe that the world will end if there are no more souls in the bank. I guess the only way that could happen is through significant overpopulation, considering the soul does not die when the physical body does. There is also a part of this theory that suggests that certain people have taken it upon themselves to murder people, so their souls will return to the bank to prevent it running out of souls. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts in the comments, plus any other icebergs you might like me to cover in the future. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Huge thank you to my Ko-fi members and channel members whose names are on screen now. I really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time in a new video.